Good evening and welcome to another episode of Guest House Television on CAN TV. I am Adam Helman, the Executive Director of the Guest House, and for our November edition of the show, we're really excited to have a special guest, my good friend Will Beiersdorf. He'll introduce himself in a minute, but to give you a little context about that, as you know, the Guest House is a nonprofit in Chicago that provides temporary lodging for patients and their families so they can be near treatment when they're in Chicago so they get the treatment they need. Now, oftentimes, when we talk about what we do, we talk about medical patients, which are, of course, a very important part of our mission. But there's also an important part of our mission, which is working with veterans. And we thought that because it's November and in honor of Veterans Day, we would talk about our service to the veterans population and our partnership with the Road Home program and the work that we do with Will and his coworkers. So to get that started, first of all, I'm going to invite Will to introduce himself, tell you a little bit about himself.
Oh, thank you, Adam. Again, I'm Will Beiersdorf. I'm the Executive Director of the Road Home program at Rush. And again, if you don't know about the Road Home program, it's basically a center for veterans and their families and service members that are struggling with post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, military sexual trauma. And I think the key thing to know is that, we're part of the Rush family. So Rush University Medical Center and doing some great work there. So we've been around 10 years. And again, we've been working with and a great partner with the Guest House. And we're grateful for all that you do to support us.
It's our pleasure. It really is. It's a great partnership for us also. Will, can you tell us a little about yourself? How did you get into this?
Yep. Yeah, so I'm a veteran myself. I served in the Army and the Navy. Some people say that's a little confusing. Well, what's going on there? But it was really great. And honestly, I joined the military because I needed to pay for college. Mm-hmm. And a couple of years later, I fell in love with it, and I stayed the course and did almost 15 years. I served in Operations Desert Storm, Enduring Freedom, so after September 11th, 2001. And then about 10 years ago, I was asked to come to Rush to help start the veteran program at Rush and created the brand and found the Road Home program. It's been a great journey, and again, Guest House has been a part of that journey for almost all those years.
Right, since 2016.
Yes.
Definitely. So what is it that drew you into that program? How did you get interested in working with veterans as a career?
Well, again, when I was deployed in September 11th, 2001, a lot of people helped my family. And so I've always had a spirit of giving back. And I also have a healthcare background. I've worked in the healthcare industry for many years. And based upon my experience, my business experience, the time that I spent in the military, I was asked to come, to Rush to help start the program, basically, and literally start from scratch because there was no Road Home program in 2013 when I came to Rush. And we opened our doors in 2014 and began operations in 2014. And we've grown from 7 people to over 70. And literally to date, we've probably helped almost 6,000 veterans, service members, and their families. And we continue to grow, probably on an annual basis, well over 1,000 to 1,200 veterans and service members are helped.
That's great. Let's talk a little bit about we talk about 6,000 veterans, and that's so wonderful. Let's talk a little bit about sort of the scale of PTSD and what we're dealing with. What are we working with as a population?
Yeah, so every conflict, every war has had they've had this thing called either shell shock, or now we describe it as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And it basically what happens is, men and women, when they serve in the military, sometimes they have experiences and there's these traumas that affect them. Everybody deals with it differently. And sometimes they can't manage, that trauma. That's where the Road Home comes in, or even the VA or other VSOs that help with post-traumatic stress. Probably about, since 9/11, probably about 1 million, men and women have experienced significant trauma or some situation, and have a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress. But we want to make sure that we also look at the bigger picture of helping the vets and the service members and their families. So we also realize that, hey, sometimes people might not be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, but they might be dealing with depression, anxiety, or maybe some substance abuse issues or things like that. The Road Home cares for those folks that are challenged with those issues as well, too. So
That's really important, it seems to me, because it's, when you start talking about the experiences that people have had when they've been literally serving our country, and you think about, well, did they go and get a diagnosis of PTSD, or are they just having trouble coping? And is that related to their time in the military? And whether they've been with a therapist who gave them that diagnosis or not sort of matters less than are they having trouble sleeping at night? Are they driven with anxiety? Do they have trouble with their emotions sometimes? Do they have trouble relating to their families? People who serve this country and served all of it as lifetime civilian, so I'm the beneficiary of this, as many of us are, those people deserve to get taken care of in their troubles, and especially when we think about wounds that are not visible.
Correct.
And we think about PTSD or those symptoms, anybody big, strong, whatever, walking down the street, you might say, well, they served in the military, they were a Marine. They look indestructible, and yet they've got on the inside those real struggles and those real traumas that they're just trying to deal with in terms of how to navigate their life, how to hold a job,
right,
how to keep their domestic life together, how to keep their family together. Let's talk a little bit about the interaction of Road Home and the guest house. So Road Home has the intensive outpatient program, or the IOP. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So when we first opened our doors, Adam, basically we were just an outpatient clinic, but we saw a need to do some more intensive treatment, something that, again, didn't demand inpatient care, but would demand something, maybe a 2 or 3 week program where we can give therapy to folks each and every day for 2 or 3 weeks. In the beginning, it was 3 weeks. We've got it down to 2 weeks now. It's called the intensive outpatient program. So there's individual therapy, there's art therapy, there's wellness, there's a whole host of different things that we do, acupuncture, and literally for 2 weeks, men and women will come to us and we will provide care. And literally we say about 6 to 8 months of therapy is actually embedded in that 2 week treatment. And it's had an incredible result. I mean, 90%, actually 95% completion rate. Also seeing the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress, actually down by like 40 or 50%. And where people are actually kind of picking up and being more resilient. Right. Being more hopeful, and also kind of walking away with a more purpose-driven, mission-driven life. At Road Home, we talk a lot about the different therapies, but we also want to make sure people are more resilient and dealing with those traumas and have a greater spirit of hope or purpose. I think that's sometimes what happens when these men and women face these different traumas, whether it's post-traumatic stress, or if it's military sexual trauma, whatever it might be, we want people to know that you have a purpose, right? And I think that's the most important thing. And then we can give them the tools of resiliency, and then give them, again, kind of a direction of hope, move forward and enjoy life.
Yes, absolutely. And the kind of the nuts and bolts of it from the guest house side are that a number of our apartments are dedicated to use by the Road Home program. So Will and his team will bring in up to 18 veterans who will come in on a Sunday and leave literally the following Friday. So they'll be with us for about 12 days. To participate in that program, they have to stay at the guest house, which we always try to make a good experience. But they stay in our apartments. Each has their own unit. And that becomes a part of their whole experience as well. And so we're really pleased to be able to serve that population. It's a different group than our medical population, but we also like to find opportunities for our different guests to get together and to interact, which is also helpful. The medical guests like it, and I think that the veterans like that as well and get something out of talking to people with medical.
Yes. And I don't want to interrupt you, but I just want to say you and your team do a great job We're grateful for all you do. The guest house plays a critical role. Yeah, you've got your long-term guests that come for all the different procedures, but our vets really are grateful. It's close to Rush, you've got great staff, and actually it's kind of nice to be in the Illinois Medical District right there. Sometimes things happen. We need the VA. Jesse Brown is right across the street from you. And if there's something more significant, then we got Rush, or we got Cook County, or we got U of I, if something else happens. So it's really nice to be there. But I think really the thing, your folks watching us tonight or wherever they're at, you and your team really do a great job. And, I can't say enough. I mean, we're grateful to be partners with you. So
Thank you. Us too. So maybe to give a better picture of this, let's show a short video of a veteran named Nick who participated in the program and stayed with us at the guest house a couple of years ago.
I was deployed overseas to Iraq in 2005 and 2006 to Fallujah. At the end of my deployment, I had a 4-day transition period. Anxiety and panic attacks when there's trash and debris in the road. The road home program was taxing, so being able to come back here to the IMD guest house and having this safe space for all of us veterans to decompress, to relax, to regain our footing from the day we just had was pivotal. Thank you to the IMD guest house for allowing us to use this space, allowing us to heal, and allowing us to keep living.
So that's a really, Will and I have seen that video a number of times, and it's always stirring to me. I actually had the opportunity to conduct that interview, so I was behind the camera when Nick was talking. One of the things that really strikes me about that as we hear him talk is he was in the reserves. So he was a Marine, but he was a Marine Reserve. So he was not full-on active duty every day, but he was called up in 2005 and he was sent to Fallujah. So he was living in Indiana, I believe. And then all of a sudden, he's for a year in a very hostile, very dangerous environment. A U.S. Marine, so he's trained and served honorably and I'm sure very courageously over there. One of the things that we don't do is really engage in combat stories. No one likes to talk about that, but and we certainly don't try and pry into that aspect of anybody's life. But he's over there, and then he comes back from Fallujah, and like 4 days later, they're like, "Hey, Nick, thanks a lot for everything you did for us. Go back to living your life now." And you think about what we read about people experienced over there and what they experience in combat in general. And, and then all of a sudden it's just like there's a light switch, theoretically, that goes off, and they say, well, go ahead, go back to living your life now, Nick. You did a great job, and now we're done with you. And that's such a hardship. And I remember him talking about the way that manifested for him, that he'd be driving down the street and he'd see a stop sign, and he'd say, well, I can't stop for the stop sign because that's where there's a roadside ambush. I've been for a year driving in places where you could get killed if you stop at the stop sign, or driving down and there are some boxes piled up by the side of the road. And, most of us, we think, well, when's the garbage man going to come to clean those up? But he's thinking, oh my God, there could be a bomb in there. And so coping with that, trying to come back from that, trying to sort of put that year of stress and worry and concern and difficulty into perspective is just, and trying to live your life and recover your life after that would just be so, so difficult.
And that's what I was saying earlier, Adam, that, again, everybody deals with the traumas differently, right? Everybody's got a different processing, and some people can manage it, other people can't, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. That's where the road home comes in. That's where the road home comes in to help kind of reprocess and kind of readdress some of those things. And again, get those folks so that they can get back to living life, right? And the therapies and the things that we do. And again, I can't say enough, Adam, you at the guest house, you're part of that therapy because, again, you provide a safe place, a quiet place. And if there's needs that these men and women have, your staff takes care of them. And that's what's so critical. It really takes a team to provide, the services we provide. And it's not just us at the road home, but it's also, it's also the bus drivers, the people that transport. They have to be listening and understanding you and your staff. Everybody's playing a role in helping these men and women get better and then get back to living life.
Absolutely right. And it's an important thing because they're living their experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Right.
It's not I'm in therapy and so now I'm going to be this person and then I'm going to be another person. And people who come to us come from all over the country. So we'll have people from Texas, we'll have people from the mountains, we'll have Florida, Southeast we get people. A lot of them, part of what they do in dealing with stress is that they don't live in a big city.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, fly to the third biggest city in America and come down to our part of town, and that's worrisome. And so being able to be calming for them, to be able to give them a full experience is such an important thing. It's interesting that one of the facilities that we offer is a community room just for veterans. Our veterans rooms or apartments are all on the same floor, all contiguous. It's the only apartments on that floor, and then they have their own community room. And when we opened it, I remember we talked about, well, let's build it out so that there's a place for there to be, or furnish it so that they can have an extension of their therapy at the guest house. And what we learned was that was kind of a no-go. Right. It was like they wanted to do therapy at Road Home, and they wanted to be on their own when they can, and have their own just recover from the day at the guest house. So we have tens of thousands of veterans who are potentially seeing this program right now, live in the Chicago area. And I want to ask a couple of questions about who can participate in the Road Home program, because somebody who's watching this right now might either be experiencing some of these things, or they might be related to somebody who's experiencing difficulty right now. So what branches of the service does the Road Home program support?
So at all branches are welcome. All areas are welcome. In fact, really, I mean, we learned early on, we weren't just going to treat post 9/11, but we were going to treat pre 9/11. It was really critical. So we opened our door wide. And again, if somebody's out there listening and watching right now and they want to learn more, again, they can go to roadhomeprogram.org to learn more. If you're local, you can also call us at 312-942-8387. That's 312-942-VETS. But the most critical thing is that if there is someone out there watching that thinks that they might need help, call us. And again, let's do an intake and let's go through the process and let's see if we're right for you, if the Road Home's the right place. And especially if there's a family member out there, if you know someone who's struggling, call us. That's the other thing I want to make sure we take note, Adam, is that we also help family members, not just veterans and service members, but family members. Family members are critical to the success of someone's recovery and to them getting back to living. So we highly encourage that. And then we also provide counseling to family members to give them the tools to be better, equipped to help with their loved one who's struggling with post-traumatic stress or military sexual trauma.
Right. Yeah, so any branch of the military, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, or Coast Guard, or Space Force.
Of course, sure.
Any era, so post 9/11, the Balkan conflict, back further, Vietnam. We have Vietnam vets.
We sure do.
And it's interesting to me to think about how the program changes, because the war in Vietnam was not an all-volunteer force. So there's a different psychology for people who were drafted and were sent overseas to serve in Vietnam than the people who volunteered to go to the Balkans or to the Middle East. So different sets of, sort of different circumstances there, different things to sort of understand. Let's talk about another thing with that. What does it mean to be a veteran in Road Home's definition? How long do you have to have served?
So, you know what? That's a great question because people always ask, am I a veteran? Do I, because I wasn't deployed. Look, if you served honorably, or even if you've had less than honorable discharge, we'll work with you. We've had people come in to us that have served like 1 week. They got hurt during basic training or some other type of accident or something that happened before they even completed their training and were actually deployed. So literally the door is wide open to all veterans, to all that have served or have worn the uniform. I always say, if you wore the uniform a day or whether 30 years, we can help you. If you had an honorable discharge, we'll help you. If you have less than honorable or even dishonorable, we'll try to help you. We'll work with you. And it's regardless of ability to pay, because a lot of people say, Will, how do I pay for this? We'll figure that out and we'll address that because again, we're 100% funded by donors. We work closely with the Veterans Administration, with the VA, and if someone is not in the VA, we encourage them to get into the VA. And we know sometimes there's some challenges with the VA, but we work closely with them and we try to be what I say like an alternative, and also additional support to the folks that are going to the VA if they need the services we provide.
Right.
So.
And just to be clear, and we certainly love and admire the VA too, but the Road Home program is not part of the Veterans Administration.
Correct.
So it's independent from the VA, and the VA
Right.
does great work, but it's a little different than the Road Home program. One other thing I wanted to just emphasize again is the idea of other than honorable discharge, because sometimes people, when they're in the military, especially if they're having a lot of trouble based on trauma, they may leave the military in a way other than with an honorable discharge.
That's correct.
And it's important to know that the door for the Road Home program is open to them, even if they had not received an honorable discharge.
That's correct.
That's really important.
That's correct. As long as they look, Adam, as long as they have a DD-214, and again, regardless of what happened with their discharge status, we will help. We'll support them, and people don't have to worry about the cost. In fact, when people come to our 2-week program, our intensive outpatient program we talked about, all costs are taken care of. Travel, airfare, whatever it is, lodging, food. It's all covered basically. And the bottom line is, if you need help or you know someone who needs help, make the call. Reach out to us and see if we're the right fit.
One other thing I want to touch on, and that is we've talked about sort of groups of people who've experienced trauma in combat or being deployed, and maybe being a little different than people who have been the victims of military sexual trauma. And one of the things about the IOP that is very important to me is that those groups are treated separately, so that people who have experienced combat PTSD or trauma in combat are working in a group of people and going to group therapy sessions with other combat veterans. People who have been victimized sexually, suffered military sexual trauma, are working as a group separately from the combat. So we don't mix those groups together, which I think is very important as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you talked about that or hit on that because, we have 2 different cohorts that come to us. It's post-traumatic stress, combat related. It could also be training accidents, other types of things. And then there's also the military sexual trauma cohort. And we're very respectful in that nature, but we also found that, people are also very flexible. We used to think that we should only have, because, the perception is it's only female veterans that have military sexual trauma. It's not.
Right.
It's both. It's men and women. And again, the female cohorts, again, when we have a few males, are very accepting and understanding, so we try to be cognizant of all that stuff, but honestly, the vets are pretty resilient and pretty flexible, and they're understanding that everyone's had some type of trauma, and they all kind of start to work as a team,
Right.
just like they did in the military.
Right, absolutely. So as we wrap up here, the Road Home program is a fabulous resource. It's really great. And if you've worn a military uniform for one day, if you're having trouble, please get in touch with Will and his team at the Road Home to see if they can give you some help. It doesn't matter when you served. It doesn't matter how you left the military.
Right.
It really matters that you're willing to ask for some help or just to inquire.
Yep, exactly.
And Will, how do they reach you again?
Again, on the web, roadhomeprogram.org. That's all one word, roadhomeprogram.org. Or call us at 312-942-8387. That's 312-942-VETS. And again, if you know someone who needs help or if you are seeking help, just make the call. Don't be afraid. And we also have veteran outreach coordinators that be glad to talk to you, to listen and see, again, how we can help you. But just make the call.
Great. Will, thanks so much for everything you do.
Thank you, Adam.
Happy Veterans Day. Thank you
Yes.
to all the veterans, and have a great evening.